This video shows you how to take out or remove an over-tightened or stock lock wheel nut from your car wheel. In my hands, I've got a lock wheel key with a curved heptagonal matching pattern, which should mate relatively easily with the lock wheel nut. Suffice to say, the matching pattern on the key should slot in perfectly into the knot and loosen the knot when we use our spider type lug wrench or wheel lug wrench. There are a myriad or a host of probable reasons why you're not getting any traction when undoing the lug nut with your lug key. The most probable variables with the highest proclivity, propensity, penchant or punch-on are that the lug nut may have been overly torque tightened. The torque tightening was done on a hub bolt hole which had been compromised by corrosive rust. The torque tightening process that was conducted on the hub bolt hole using a gun and a new standard bolt or new lug nut resulted in the cross threading of the hub bolt hole, plausibly or presumably. And oftentimes when torque loosening, the integrity of the hole is compromised, it's severed or chamfered off due to the fickle nature of corrosive rust and the force generated from friction, also leaving your lug key compromised or damaged, which will in turn to a reasonable nth degree compromise the integrity on your lug wheel nut. Suffice to say, when you're torque loosening a lug nut with a lug key anticlockwise, the protruding mating matching pattern of the lug key could shear or sever the grooves in the lug nut. And also it could be that the technician in your garage had mismatched, the lug key with a different lug key in his toolbox. So just make sure that when you get your lug key back that you ensure that, the pattern is correct. If you're handed over a similar lug key which doesn't have the exact matching pattern, it could readily compromise the integrity of your lug nut, so make sure you carry out due diligence, okay? Just get objective evidence or a photo of the matching pattern prior to handing over your lug key, okay? We're not saying that these plausible or probable reasons are the only factors that influence you not being able to get your lug nut off. It could be any other reason, so this is not a one size fits all, but they're just probable variables with the highest inclination, okay? On each tire, we've got 4 standard bolts and 1 lug bolt. So we're going to look at versatile tools with which we could use to get off, the stock lug nut off, okay? Before we take off the lug nut in real time, the Dynomec and the Franklin's wheel nut removal set practically do about the same thing. This is the Dynomec Extra Large Toolkit, which encompasses the hand protection ring, the center punch, the hammer, the blades A, B, C, D, the main tool, the impact driver, and the adapters for Jaguar and Range Rover, the outer shroud for the tool body and the PVC tape. The Dynomec Extra Large has got 5 blade Cs and the Jaguar and Range Rover adapter, whilst the regular kit has got only 3 blade Cs, no Jaguar or Range Rover adapters. It hasn't got a club hammer and no PVC tape. So your purchase can be tailored bespoke to your requirements. For the Franklin's wheel nut remover, you can clearly see the blades A, blades B, blade C, just one quantity piece. The mandrel A and B aft wheel tools for blades A and B, the center punch aft wheel tool, the inner shroud and metal spring ring, the professional impact driver, the main body and outer shroud, and a 24mm socket that fits into the impact driver. So you've got a huge variety out there in the market that you can choose from. In terms of setting up the tool to remove the lug nut, select the appropriate blade with respect to the design and construct of the matching key pattern of your lug key, and more importantly, your lug nut. According to the toolkit remover guide, this is a hardened knot, and blade C is required to remove this type of hardened lug knot. And so the type of blade selected is dependent on the matching groove pattern of the lug knot. Blades A and B will be damaged if they are used on this particular hardened lug knot. Select blades A and its corresponding mandrel if the lug nut pattern in your wheel falls within this category, from figure A1 to A10, and subsequently select blades B and its corresponding mandrel if your lug pattern falls between lug nut pattern from figures B1 to B13. Depending on the design of your lug nuts, when using blades B, you may need to test the hardness with a center punch or line up the blade tips with the holes where possible. And also, prior to using blades A, in some scenarios, you may need to cut through the lock with an ordinary chisel or use a center punch in the center prior to using the blade A and its corresponding mandrel. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we will be using the blades C for the lug nut in the wheel. So first, offer blade C to the lug nut, feel the blade locate into the groove on the end face of the lug nut. Blade C is designed to remove two sizes of lug nut, so choose the end that best locates into the lug nut pattern, as one end of the blade is designed to remove all 4 lug nuts on one vehicle. So here, this end of the blade fits into the groove better. I will proceed to insert the blade C into the tool body with the correct end facing outwards. Then offer the assembled tool into the lug nut. Then use a hammer to drive the tool into the lug nut. The more I drive the tool into the lug nut, the better the grip. Then subsequently, assemble the 24mm impact socket into the impact driver, and then install the hand protection ring to protect your hands when hammering down. Then use the impact driver or the breaker bar to turn the lug nut. Before the lug nut is removed from the wheel, push up and down on the tool body to remove the lug nut from the blade. And when I remove the impact driver to inspect the blade C, you can see that the blade C has become molded. It has taken the shape of the pattern of the lug nut. Then I can proceed to use the molded blade C to remove the next lug nut by swapping the impact driver for a breaker bar, then subsequently offering the tool to the lug nut and then twisting until the tool locates into the lug nut. The molded blade C from the first lug nut makes it a lot easier to take off the remainder of them 4 lug nuts, okay? Also, take note that you don't always have to use an impact driver in the first instance. To take off the first lug nut, you can also use a breaker bar. So you can also use a breaker bar with a 24mm socket to turn the tool on the lug nut in the anti-clockwise orientation. And you can clearly see that when I take out the tool from the wheel's recess, the blade C has been molded and has taken the shape of the lock or lug nut like an amoeba. So a quick recap would be to test which end of the blade C best locates in the center of the lug nut, and then insert the blade C into the tool and the wheel's recess lug nut pattern, and then use a hammer and hand protection ring to drive the tool into the lug nut. Then use an impact driver or breaker bar to turn the tool and gripped lug nut anti-clockwise whilst hammering down. When you get traction whilst torque loosening, undo the lug nut with the impact driver or bar breaker. Pull down the shroud which protects the wheel and take out the molded blade C from the lug nut. We also have the mandrel A and B aft wheel tool, which are inserted into blades A and B that grips the lug wheel nut. To use, separate the outer shroud from the tool body. If the inner shroud fits over the lug nut, then place onto the blade, as this will help keep the tool on center. Blades A and B mustn't be used on hardened nuts, so use the center punch to test for hardness on the lock nuts. If the center punch makes a pop mark without deforming, then proceed, but if the punch blunts, do not use blades A and B, okay? Where possible, test in the center of the lock nut face. Then repeat the process of removal by using a good quality air impact wrench with the car raised on a ramp, or use a heavy duty impact driver or breaker bar, whilst ensuring that the older wheel nuts are still fitted in place whilst the problem nut is being released. And so now that we are conversant with the process of using the locking nut remover, which encompasses the tool, the impact driver, the blades, and center punch, we will be taking off this stock locking nut in real time and at night time, as you might break down with a flat tire and a stock locking wheel nut at any time. So make sure you have one of them bright LED lights in the trunk of the car, as they can be quite handy when you find yourself in obscure or dark places, as them bright LED lights enliven and brighten up the workspace, especially as you will be visually inspecting the pattern of the locking wheel nut, also ensuring that the blade C inserted into the work tool fits properly in the groove center of the locking nut prior to and after hammering down. Once a firm grip is established between the blade C and the lock nut, insert the impact driver, and whilst hammering down the impact driver and the work tool assembly, rotate anti-clockwise whilst pushing up and down the assembly in order to get traction for the torque loosening of the lock nut, which is taken out here and evidenced by the empty nut or bolt hole. The next step would be to install the new lock nut matching pattern in the nut hole, and then subsequently hand tighten with a torque wrench to finish off the torque tightening installation for the lock nut, and then subsequently fully torque tighten any loose standard bolts on the wheel. Check the lock nut, and if it's not been fully tightened, loosen and retighten the lock nut using the required torque force as per your manufacturer's instruction. And as you can see, some final checks have been done. The lock nut, which was undone, is being torque tightened back into position. And this is the new lock nut that has been installed back into position. Visually inspect all the holes to ensure that you've got 4 standard bolts fitted and 1 lug nut fitted. Once all the standard bolts and the lock nuts have been accounted for and identified, replace the cap covers for each respective standard bolts. And then subsequently, repeat and reproduce the process for the remainder of them 3 tires, as all tires on the vehicle need at least 1 lug lock nut and 4 standard bolts. And that's about it really. Click on the link in the description for tips on how to troubleshoot noise coming from your engine, from your car braking system, how to pressure wash your car, how to clean the interior and exterior, and other car useful tips. And also, don't forget to subscribe and share, helps the channel grow, and hopefully catch up with you later. Thank you for your time, thank you for listening, goodbye.